To be honest, I think if we do something like that, there's probably going to be intelligent life already there. Like the people
Of some
like us
form,
will
like
be there.
bacteria or
And
whatever.
we don't even have any of their currency, you know? So how are we going to buy real estate there, Lewis? You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah,
not going to
yeah.
happen, you
Yeah,
know what I
we're
mean?
gonna invade another planet across billions of light years, and then we're gonna fucking plant our flag in the soil and be like, okay, let's start democratic relations.
Well, but
Definitely,
the thing
bro.
is, we're going to get there and they're going to have like systems in place that are just like ours. You know, like
Hmm.
currency will exist there,
Sure, sure.
societies will have formed like ours have. Like, we're not going to be able to go there and like take it over because it's going to be fucking full
I think
of
we
other
will
people.
quite easily take it over. They haven't left their planet. We have. We know how to do that shit, man.
Ah, oh,
We,
I see what
if
you're
we were to
saying.
meet another technology, another alien race out
If
there
we're
that
to
wasn't
get there,
spacefaring, yeah, then we would have like such a massive, massive advantage in our technology available that I think we could absolutely steamroll.
they
And
have like
that's
sticks
why,
and spears, and we have like
yeah, fucking laser
machine
guns.
guns.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
dude,
By that time,
we're
yeah,
firing from space, you know.
we're talking about
Like,
Star Wars. What we're talking about here.
yeah, yeah. Well, that
3, 2, 1. Nice weekend in Bristol this weekend, Lewis. One thing I took away, very progressive there. Like
super
totally,
aggressive. Yeah.
yeah. Like you said, everyone's wearing these like second-hand like vintage clothes as well, and the place is so progressive that we openly walked into a gay bar by accident and
Yeah.
like stayed there for hours.
And it took us hours to realize it was a gay bar. Absolutely hours.
Yeah, that was probably. I didn't realize how fun it would be to like be in a gay bar. Like music's like great, we're like dancing about, and guys are like looking at us, and we're like, "Oh man,
Everyone's so friendly. Yeah. What's going on
how you
here?
doing?" People
Yeah.
walking past us like, "All right,
I know.
what's happening, mate?"
Yeah, man. Bristol's a wacky place. Absolutely
Yeah,
wacky place. Yeah, yeah. Fucking
yeah.
great for nights out though. Absolutely great
Aye,
for nights out.
I'm definitely,
Especially, yeah, fucking OMG by the way.
I'm
Place
definitely
to
looking
be at
forward
night.
to the next. Definitely looking forward to the next night out there. That was really really good.
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
probably I'm going back there to be honest.
So I'm thinking as well, we're like an entire town full of nightclubs and we're like, OMG again. That'd
I'm
be-
not really sure what like the etiquette there is though. We never really found out, did we? Because we told
No.
a couple of people that we like weren't gay as we were in there, and
They were
they
okay.
they were
Yeah.
okay with it, aye, but I'm not really sure because like at one point this girl came out and started dancing with me, and I was like, "Oh, hello!" Started dancing away with her, and like I guess she just thought I was gay, and then
You
like
didn't realise you were gay, right? Yeah, 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 yeah.
they just like wandered off, and I was like, I guess I won't tell her. I'll just let her think whatever she thought, and then let her go off and enjoy the rest of her night. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, next time we'll ask more questions and really get the scoop on the actual gay scene in Bristol instead of just being completely unintentional.
Yeah, we'll need to ask questions on the door, surveys and stuff like that as we
Yeah,
get
yeah,
inside.
yeah, yeah.
So if you didn't know, this is Guide to the 21st Century, a conversational podcast between two friends, Lewis and I, discussing topical issues and trying to navigate the minefield that is life in the 21st century.
Each week, Scott and I go away and think of something that's been playing in our mind this week, and we'll bring it to the guide where we'll just hash that out with each other, basically try to reach some new conclusions that we probably hadn't have reached on our own.
So we talk about a lot of issues in the show that we think we
Every
can
week.
so that we can every single week without fail.
Mm.
We talk about some sort of issue that we think we can either change in some way, that changes can be made like by the general public or by the government, or even like just raising awareness about issues
Yeah,
for
yeah.
people to think about in the future.
Mhm.
So all of these things that we talk about, in order to like change them or to move things forward or to progress them in any way, shape, or form, it'll take up like resources, it'll take time, it'll take money, and the will to do so as well. And this week I saw a story on the news that had something to do with like satellites. I'm not really sure what it was. I kind of like skimmed past it, but it made me think that as like a society, like human beings spend like a hell of a lot of money on space travel. So I'm thinking about like missions to like the moon, like the Apollo missions, sending like astronauts into space. I seen the other week, I think was it Richard Branson did some sort of space
Yeah, that's right. You had another publicity
excursion
stunt.
thing. Yeah,
mhm.
which sounds like absolute nonsense if you ask me. But I know there's also like a big thing right now where they're like trying to get that mission to Mars like pushed forward. Elon Musk does a lot of talking about space. I'm not really
Sure.
sure how much of it is like realistic. I also don't know how much of it is like just a money sink for them just to throw money at like a space shuttle program that just goes absolutely nowhere.
Right.
But when I think about space travel, my idea of it is to either to like get somewhere else, to like get to another planet. So eventually, we're trying to go to Mars or trying to go to the moon. In my mind, before I started researching this topic, the main goal of like going out into space would be to find maybe somewhere else that humans can go. You know, another like planet we can populate, another place where we can survive.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that's way off.
That's impossible. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, probably very much impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like that's the goal for, in my mind anyway. That's what I thought it was. Or
I think that's what a lot of people.
at the very least, it was either to do that or to make some sort of like scientific discoveries that we can't do on Earth. Now, I'm not an expert in like space travel or like anything like that. I briefly considered doing astrophysics at university, but I ended up choosing like engineering. So I'm
Probably
not
a better idea, Scott, to be honest with you. But
yeah, I'm not sure astrophysics has that much job security at the
yeah.
end. I think you have to go into like accounting or something like that after that.
Hopefully.
But yeah, I'm not like an expert on it, so I don't know what sort of like scientific discoveries like. So you go to like the moon or you go to Mars and you make scientific discoveries there. How would those things would impact people on Earth? Like, would they make any significant improvements here? I don't know. So those seem like the kind of two major things for me. I don't know what do you think about like space travel and like general? What's the goal about it?
So I think, yeah, what you addressed just there is what the majority of people think when we talk about space travel. You know, people think about like, let's fucking leave the Earth and find out a new one and just scrap this and try it again. And I think like Neil deGrasse Tyson, he talks about that a lot of the time. He's like, he always gives up the argument of like, people think we should spend on our own planet, but why shouldn't we just like continue space exploration and eventually start a new type of thing? But I think that's like so pie in the sky type of shit. Like the idea of us moving any significant fraction of our population off of our planet onto a different one is like absolutely ludicrous. I can maybe imagine within like 50 years having a colony on Mars. I think that's actually very achievable. And but like for the majority of humanity, there's absolutely no value in us doing that. From what I seem to understand, the research that we do in space and on the moon is simply to identify how it's going to work in terms of us leaving the planet, like for long-term experiments and how we deal with space, how we can make our own food, how we deal with different types of oxygen and these type of weird environments. It seems that most of the research that's happening in terms of like like moon stuff or like the type of shit that NASA's carrying out is for like these really long-term space missions. And I think you're right, that might not be. I think that might be somewhat stupid, but much more like down to earth probably isn't the right phrase to use.
Brilliant.
To use here.
Brilliant. You should have just transitioned straight into that, and that we'd have been golf clapping you all the way back home.
Yeah. I would have put it in the editing, Yeah, but
there's your intro right there.
Nice one. It's not going to take me fucking ages to find that. But what's much more realistic and much more down to earth would be the application of space travel for like satellites. I think that's where I think the future of space technology is moving us, is because basically I think the rate at which we've been launching things into space has just been going up and up and up and up. And as we require and rely more heavily on technology, we have many more uses of satellites, and basically this is what's going to keep happening. And eventually as well, we're going to start using different areas of the atmosphere. Like right now our satellites have to be quite high up, but as we bring it lower and lower and lower, as these applications become more specific, all of a sudden like the aerospace in which these actual satellites use is going to become like a technical legality thing. And I think there's a huge future of space, not even travel, just space commercialization in terms of that regard. But leaving the planet, I think it's like it's not going to
that'll be when it really takes off, won't it? When all of a sudden it becomes profitable,
Oh yeah.
To like go out and there's like real estate up there and things like that. It's gonna
dude like that. I remember reading about that a couple of years ago. Like, see certain hedge funds for like fucking like LA. New York, sorry, it wouldn't be LA. Like these massive like hedge funds that have like trillions of dollars. They're buying aerospace. We don't have any use for that right now, but they're like trying to invest in the future, because the idea is that like really, really intelligent analysts and like scientists have said that 40 years from now, there are going to be certain types of areas. So imagine like the aerospace above New York, I'm not talking about even higher than planes, like not as high as satellites, but higher than planes. Like that's going to become super, super valuable. And that's like an entire world of technology that we don't even exactly know how we're going to use it. But people think there's going to be value there, and you're right. I think they will see like a boom in the industry once money starts getting involved.
You'll have that like massive like innovation period where all of a sudden they realize there's like money to be made here, and I think there's probably going to be a massive wave of real beneficial
tech
and like innovations that happen, and then inevitably that'll plateau, and all of a sudden money will just corrupt it like it does everything else.
Yeah.
But that's a topic for another day, though. But I want to go back to when you said about space travel and the form that people don't, form people do think about it. So they think about populating like other worlds. I think we're probably agreed in the fact that we don't think that's possible in like any way, shape, or form. Like maybe we can colonize Mars. I guess you could, if you're saying we could put a colony there in some, I don't know, a century in the future or something like that. But I don't think it's
not
going to
even
be
that far.
like, it's not going to be like hospitable. I don't think in any way, shape, or
No,
form.
no. Imagine like biodomes,
Yeah.
and you'll never leave, and you have to wear an environmental suit the entire time you're there. Another theory is actually just mining underground. Like, see if you just live underground, you won't need to worry about the temperature, won't need to worry about the sun's rays, won't need to worry about the atmosphere. So there are feasible solutions we can come up with. The question you need to ask yourself is, why would we want to start a colony on Mars?
Well, yeah, I'm not really sure about that either. Maybe there's like scientific discoveries to be made. I'm not entirely sure. But in terms of like
Sure.
moving to like another planet, I'm thinking about like an Earth 2, where like we go to somewhere that's like the conditions are kind of like Earth, and we can go there and we can live, and there's obviously going to be resources there to be had. To be honest, I think if we do something like that, there's probably going to be intelligent life already there. Like the people
Of some
like us
form,
will
like
be there.
bacteria or whatever.
And we don't even have any of their currency, So how are we going to buy real estate there, Lewis? You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to happen. You know
Yeah,
what I
we're
mean?
going to invade another planet across billions of light years, and then we're going to fucking plant our flag in the soil and be like, okay, let's start democratic relations.
Well, but
Definitely,
the
bro.
thing is, we're going to get there, and they're going to have like systems in place that are just like ours. Like currency will exist there.
Sure,
Societies will have formed like ours have. Like we're not going to be able to go there and like take it over because it's going to be fucking full
I think we
of other
will
people.
quite easily take it over. They haven't left their planet. We have. We know how to do that shit, man.
Oh, I see what
If
you're
we were
saying.
to meet another technology, another alien race out
If
there,
we're to
wasn't
get there,
spacefaring, yeah, then we would have like such a massive, massive advantage in our technology available that I think we could absolutely steamroll.
they
And
have like
that's
sticks
why-
and spears, and we have like
yeah, fucking laser
machine
guns.
guns.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
laser gun. Yeah,
yeah, dude,
by
we're,
that time,
we're
yeah.
firing from space, you know.
We're talking about
Like,
Star Wars. What we're talking about here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that isn't. I don't know if you knew, but like Stephen Hawking, he was a massive advocate against trying to discover alien life because he actually believed that as soon as we were to discover alien life, if there was any alien race that ever encountered ours, the only reason they'd be traveling through the universe was to try and look for extra resources. And if they were to ever reach us before we could reach them, they would outpace us technologically by such a degree that they basically just like ransack Earth, destroy all of our life, and harvest our water and fuck off. Hawkins believed that was the most likely outcome for meeting an intelligent species.
Well, so what if we're traveling to another planet? We're traveling to Earth 2. We'll name it that from now on.
Right. Okay.
But the time that it takes us to get to Earth 2, like I'm thinking like cryogenic pods,
Generations.
like
Yeah.
people like frozen somehow. I don't know. It would take so long for us to get there. By the time we have got there, they've probably caught up technologically, or maybe even surpassed us. So we turn up with these like laser guns, and they're like teleporting about. There's like no planes here. They're just like literally moving matter across like massive spaces, like creating their own wormholes and things like that.
Yeah. If that happens, then we just need to get down on our knees and fucking like beg them not to just like blink us out of
Evaporate
existence.
us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they've like contacted God. They like know how it all works. They just blink us out of existence.
Yeah, they're looking at all the fucking space lasers in their hold and like, why the fuck did you bring those? We're like, no reason at all. We're just here to chat.
Yeah,
we're
I
absolutely
don't honestly don't think that getting to like Earth 2 is like possible in
No.
any way, shape, and form. Like it seems like it would take so long to get somewhere like that. By the time you even got there, surely humans would just be extinct on this planet.
Yeah.
Maybe that is a reason to go. I guess.
I can think of a scenario in which corporations would want, or people in the individuals would want to move to a different planet. So I think, yeah, obviously Earth 2 is not going to happen. But if we were to like start a lunar colony or like a Mars colony, then like think about the fact that there'd be no infrastructure there whatsoever. There'd be like no house building companies, there'd be no sewage companies, there'd be no plumbing companies, no tech companies, no food companies. All that is potential real estate for companies that already exist on Earth to have a Mars division. And see if you're like imagine as well that like maybe fucking 10 companies managed to make it up there. I don't even know how they're going to get up there, whether they're going to fund this themselves. Imagine like Amazon building a rocket to bring fucking Amazon to Mars, But once you're in Mars, the only shit you can buy is from Amazon. You know, they have complete control over everything there because it's not like you can
It's like
phone
that
Earth.
now. It's like that now. Don't worry.
Well, that's what I think. That's what they're fucking planning for. Like they're gonna commercialize colonies to such an extent, and the colonies are going to have a fucking clue what's going to happen to them, man. Like it's the whole idea of moving to another planet. One, it's unreasonable. Two, it sounds like hell. I think it would be absolute hell.
Especially the people that like first go there to try and like start up the colony. That sounds like it would be. That's a tough gig. You know, you're kind of committing your life to doing that. Like, it's going to be you doing that forever now. You're probably going to die in the process, sort of thing.
You'll
to
probably
get
never
there
see
and
it.
like start populating like straight away.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I think it would be quite a soul crushing one as well, because that's what I'm saying. Like, I think there are probably people on Earth that would do that type of shit. You know, people that would just commit their life to a cause, and like, you know, people that don't have anything left of them here. I can see it happening, but like, it's like fucking when the British went over to colonize America, isn't it? They'd like start their towns up, they'd like have their own laws, they'd start their farming, they'd have a small community. But then, like, you know, 5 generations later, this is just owned by a company now, you know, and I don't see any reason why that wouldn't happen for any.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't just take the systems that apply on Earth and then
just copy and paste.
That's just like more space, just like I was about to say a seventh continent there, but I stopped myself. It's just like another area of like land that will be applied to, you know, and there'll be no country there that already owns it. There's no people there, so it's like just literally free real estate.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Yeah, it's like free real estate, but it's free on like hundreds of different levels, man. Like, there's going to be no laws, there's going to be no fucking politicians, there's going to be no infrastructure, and like, this is the opportunity for like Mars will be chock full of entrepreneurs. Because they're the only people that are going to fucking want to go there. It's because they're imagining themselves, like, imagine after 200 years and I've set up the first sewage system on Mars, you know, like, that's going to be them fucking chalked out. Like, there's going to be a bunch of vicious fucking Wolf of Wall Street types on Mars. And that's what I'm saying. When I talk about hell, I thought we have any idea about how horrific that would be.
Like you would turn up to the biodome and it'll be like the Nesquik Lake, and it'll be like, like the Pepsi skyscrapers. It's all sponsored like shit, you know. Pepsi have like sponsored the companies to like go up there and build this stuff. It's like, as long as you name everything Pepsi, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah. I'm imagining like this the spaceship and like Wall-E, you know, I can't remember what that company even is. It's like fucking, it's basically like Costco of the future, you know, it's just branding absolutely everywhere. I can see it already. But the thing is, dude, I think it's possible. And I think you and I are going to see it within our lives, you know?
Well, it might be possible. So the UK Space Agency currently spends, as it stands, every year, the annual budget right now is £469 million.
The UK?
The UK Space Agency budget is £469 million. Just to give a little comparison, the NHS budget is £212 billion.
Oh my God, okay.
So it's not
that much.
No. I'm gonna Google that just like right now, just to make sure that sum's correct. But the US has also got a massive space program in NASA.
Mm-hmm.
Now the NASA budget each and every year is $22.6 billion, which is 0.5% of what they spend. So
of their budget.
One in every £200 is put towards NASA, basically, which seems like a huge amount of money. I don't think I could even fathom how much money that is. Like I don't know, like in terms of like the pie chart of like American of the budget of the American expenditure. I don't know how like big a slice that will be in comparison to everything else. Although for reference for that one as well, the defense budget in America is $715 billion. So that'll be like a massive chunk of it, I'd imagine. It seems like it's maybe like a third or something of like what they spend. You know, it's something like absolutely crazy. So in terms of the money that like these countries are like spending on like space travel, it's sort of a tiny slice of their overall budgets for these things.
It's still appreciable, sure.
Yeah, but still a significant amount. And there are plenty of benefits, as I've been researching as well. So from the sort of space exploration missions, the satellites going up, the lunar missions, the going up into space, all these missions, we've had a bunch of like advancements in medical technology. Mostly
materials and shit like that.
Mostly coincidental, I think. So there's been an increase in the surgical precision of like machines. So there's been a bunch of like surgery robots that have came about, and I read a couple of things that was like memory foam was created because it was something to do with astronauts needed like somewhere to sleep or something along those lines. It was basically created coincidentally, and it came back to Earth through these like space
Yeah, it
exploration
trickled
missions.
down. Hmm.
Yeah, they're like a bunch of inventions that we do in order to go to space that we then say, oh, actually, we could use that here.
Right.
So there are like coincidental inventions that happen all the time that sort of advance, I guess, our
I think
quality of life
dehydrated
here.
food's like that as well. Like because now they give dehydrated food to soldiers when they're like in wars and that type of thing,
Right.
just because it's more convenient.
So there are a bunch of things like that. I never thought about space exploration when I started looking at this and I was like space travel. I immediately thought of going to another planet. I thought of like scientific discoveries on Mars. I never even thought about like satellites, like going up into space and the
Mm.
satellite, the awareness and the knowledge that that gives us. So satellites are basically how we know about things like climate change. We have GPS, like on your phone, like you can just plug something into maps and it'll like
Hmm.
take you there. Satellites do a bunch of stuff for us on like pollution as well. It's a good way to monitor like the ozone layer,
Hmm.
and you can get like a large scale view of the world. I think they do a lot of like recording species and stuff like that on satellites as well. So
All right. Okay.
they know
I
about
know
like
that.
endangered species and how they're kind of their zones are kind of shrinking and things like that.
Wow.
Satellite TV, that's like a massive one where that that there was a big boom for that, and that's in like every household in the world like
Hmm.
shortly, right?
Hmm. Phones.
Uh, sure, phones. There are other things like weather forecasts, which go on all the time, which can predict things like natural disasters. Apparently, aids agriculture as well.
All
So
right.
like
Okay.
because farmers know what the weather's going to be like, they can plant their
Yeah.
crops around like rainfall.
Intelligent farming. Hmm.
Yeah, these sort of like prediction engines that predict the weather forecast. There are obviously a bunch of like scientific discoveries as well when you go to like the moon and you go to Mars, and or I think there have also been a bunch of like medical discoveries about how there's like certain cardiovascular conditions that we can research somehow when we go to space. I'm
Oh.
not entirely sure how it works, but there have been some like medical advancements in the knowledge of like conditions,
Right.
because
Okay.
apparently going to space is like quite similar to like aging, where your muscles start to deteriorate a little
Oh,
bit.
atrophy and stuff like that. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's been
Hmm.
some medical advancement, some advancement in knowledge there. Um, Space is kind of cool as well. So I thought
Sure.
that, I mean, it might be like a good way to get kids involved in like STEM, to like encourage people to get involved in these sort of like career fields.
Hmm. Hmm.
And one of the benefits I've seen online was that it creates jobs. Although I wasn't really sure if we should put this in like benefits or not, because yes, it does create jobs, but we're talking about like weighing up the potential good to like the amount of money that we spend. So I don't know if we can say job creation is a good thing if we're not entirely sure if the money is like worth being spent, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. I think that we talk about that quite a bit, though, isn't it? Like, where it's like, I think a lot of the reason for things existing in the first place isn't because they're good; it's just because they make jobs. I think that's, from a government's perspective, is probably super, super valuable. Like NASA, even if it didn't have any of its contributions for America at all, the amount of people that it keeps employed is like quite significant. But I know what you mean in terms of how we should be propping that up.
Yeah, I seen some like criticism as well, although it wasn't as much. But the main sort of criticisms of it are about the money that we spend in it. So there was a bunch of people that I seen online that were advocating for more money in things like social welfare
Hmm.
and questioning like the return of investment that we get from like
Right.
these space shuttle missions. Which I would be perfectly willing to believe that there are a lot of missions that probably just become like money black holes. There are probably like entire wings of NASA which like never do anything but suck up so much money it's
Well, yeah,
unreal. You know what I mean?
it's what I'll be getting on to in part two of the episode. Tune in, is that a lot of time in science, it doesn't make money at the end of the day. Some of these things are just like you'll have a hypothesis, and NASA will spend 2 years studying it to try and come up with a new type of engine that does this. After 2 years, they'll be like, shit, it just doesn't work. It's like there's undoubtable that it's a fucking massive black hole. I think there's something to be said though of what you mentioned of like morale and that type of thing. Like.
Well, so we're looking into like space travel and we're thinking about colonizing the moon and Mars, and there are a bunch of like coincidental discoveries along the way, but we always have the capability to discover these things even if we don't go to space. We could have invented memory foam mattresses without going to space. You know what I mean? We can advance like surgical machines without going to space. These were just things that we did coincidentally as we were doing so. So that's when it starts to become a bit like blurry for me when I think about things like social welfare and I think about the Earth's environment, like how much money, like resources, carbon emissions, how much of these things are we exuding in order to do space travel? and it almost looks like we're kind of doing like Earth's environment versus like traveling to like the moon or traveling to Mars. It's like, how much are we damaging like what's here? Surely we should be like focusing on fixing the problems that are going on in Earth right now before we start thinking about,
Mm.
jumping up into space sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was kind of the point I tried to make at the beginning there. I probably botched it. It's like, because Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's a massive advocate for continuing research into space travel. It's because like there are, and you're right, there are so many dissonance and naysayers that basically say like, why the fuck are we wasting money on this? Like, what are realistically we going to get out of this? Is because even if we do make it to space, it's not going to be within our lifetime and that type of thing. Like, I get it. It's always, I think it's a really, really, really tough one for me actually. It's because I think what you're saying about us like discovering these technologies and like we could have done it. We could have done it if we hadn't tried space travel. I don't think that's necessarily true. I get what you're saying that like, of course, it was, if we hadn't had space travel, it would have been undiscovered. Therefore, we would have had the possibility of discovering some other area. Don't necessarily think that it would have just popped up though. I don't know. I think shit like that. Shit like fucking the possibilities of like space travel, like things beyond us. I think it's really, really important in terms of like human psyche, man. You know, like we need to have to me, it matters that we have an awareness that we are in a tiny, tiny blue marble, and like we live in a space that's just beyond your imagination. And what we're doing is researching that right now to get a better understanding of it, and see even if we don't fucking go to a different planet. Being someone that comes from like science, I'm just like, I think that was worth knowing in the first place because we have that knowledge now, you know. And like, sure, we might not, we'll use the knowledge for different applications. Like, for instance, like it's like you said, all this shit that we're researching, we can use it for things like satellites. We can use it for, improved the airspace and all that. But I can understand why people would be like, this is a complete waste of time.
So you think there's benefit to the knowledge that we gain at the same time?
Yes, I definitely do. Yeah, outside of like the like me wanting us to research this just because it's us learning, I think that we do undoubtedly pick up handy stuff along the way, like memory foam and stuff you said. And then even once we've done the research, I'm pretty sure that we can usually find ways to apply it in some way. Like I know that it can seem like a money black hole, but like I have absolutely no doubt that what's happening will have applications in other ways. Otherwise, otherwise, I'm pretty sure it just wouldn't happen. You know, like it's so much of a black hole that surely there must be benefit out here. Stuff must trickle down. Like I fucking NASA is so incredibly wide ranging. It's like hard to believe the amount of technologies that they're working in, and it's not all through the space, like because everything obviously is the end goal ties up to space, but they're working with like optical fibers, they're working with lasers, they're working with waveguides, and this is only shit that I've been exposed to. They work with every single industry. They work with biology, chemistry, and physics. Like it's such a huge multidisciplinary science that like the stuff undoubtedly trickles down, man. I've no doubt about that.
There's two factors for it from me when I look at it in terms of the government. I think about the government as like this, I guess, quite immoral entity that looks at like the budgets and things like that and weighs up how much they're worth. Like, I guess they're moral to an extent, but like you take the coronavirus for example, like the pandemic, like the government kind of like weighed up what lockdown was like going to do, sort of thing. Like the UK especially at the very beginning, they were like, "Oh, we don't want to do a lockdown because it'll cause economic meltdown." But they knew people were going to die, sort of thing. So it kind of becomes this almost like immoral entity that only does things that really benefits the country. Like it almost kind of boils down to bottom line, sort of thing. It's almost like a company that's kind of trying to run a country. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, without doubt there.
So the money that's been spent on things like NASA and the UK Space Agency, they must be seeing some benefit for it somewhere. They must be seeing some return on their investment, because if they weren't seeing that at all, then they wouldn't be getting any funding. They'd be dropping the funding, they'd be cutting the funding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
However, if I flip that coin around, I think to myself, there are probably so many jobs in this field. Like, think about how many people NASA must employ, or like the UK Space Agency, how many people they must employ. Like I told you, that the US spends £22.6 billion on NASA every single year. I'd imagine a lot of that goes towards like salaries. I'm not entirely sure, but I imagine a lot of it goes towards salaries. If you stop funding that and all these people like lose their job, they'd have like a massive like influx of unemployment.
Yeah.
and people that are all of a sudden like don't have a job. And I'm not these people. These people are like smart people. You know, they're like STEM engineers. They're
They have
scientists.
value. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
They have
they'll
value
surely be
to
able to
society.
find a job elsewhere. But I wonder how much like the unemployment spike or like what that would do to the economy stops them from cutting the funding, you know, because they can't all of a sudden turn around and be like, we're not funding your people anymore. They could like cut their funding to the point where they do less research, but they can't turn around and say, we're going to give you so little money that you can't afford the people that you employ, because then they have to have redundancies, you know?
I think that happened during the Trump administration.
Did
It
it?
was massive. Yeah, there was massive people being fired from NASA and just finding work in other industries. And that's the great thing about NASA, is that because it's so multidisciplinary, a lot of them could find other jobs. But yeah, like NASA took a severe setback through the Trump administration, and it was exactly what you're saying. It was like, we're not going to get value out of this in the short term, so like let's not worry about fucking the space agency. And I think NASA took several steps backward during his reign in power.
It makes you wonder, like, what Trump was then doing with the budget, if he was like cutting that budget. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
he didn't help like race relations. He didn't. I can't imagine socially he did very much.
I think, like most good presidents, he was probably making his friends very rich, and he was like dipping out of other budgets to do that. I'm speaking as someone completely. I don't have a fucking clue, but you can only assume it's something that equally nefarious like that, though, right?
Where he was doing, he was like putting money into industries that would make his friends rich, like
yeah.
taking the American budget and doing that. That's yeah. I
Very
guess I never
realistic,
really
I think.
thought about it like that, but you do hear about, you know, especially during the pandemic, about these politicians that are handing like contracts to people that they know and things like that, massive like PPE contracts that are going to companies
Right,
that are led by like
right.
their friends and things. I wonder how much of the political budget of these countries. This is again a topic for another day. I wonder how much of the political budget is like corrupt money that they put somewhere, you know, instead of actually like focusing it on.
I think it's absolutely massive. I think that, as you said, topic for another day. But you're right. I think when it comes to like making decisions with money in the budgets, all that matters is you generate jobs. I think that's like the line they like to hear is, if this like building project is going to, like, you know, we're going to add a motorway across these 4 states, how many people is that going to employ for how long? Good enough. Like that, it doesn't really matter who gets a job, that type of thing. But see, coming back to that point, you're talking about how like you think governments might technically be like immoral entities. Like I think I might end up I kind of look at that from the exact opposite perspective, actually. It's because the point of the government is inherently moral. You know, the structure there, it's there to guide civilization towards prosperity, and put up systems of control so that the people that are within this nation are like feel equally represented, and kind of like enact democracy and that type of thing. Like I can't help but feel that governments are ultimately moral. It's just that I totally agree with you that, and you know, most systems that end up having that degree of complexity get super corrupt, and it does become numbers games, and effectively at certain levels these governments become absolutely no different from a company. But to bring it back, yeah, that's what I was trying to say earlier. I think the amount of jobs that NASA must make each single year is probably absolutely fucking massive.
I think the criticism that it faces as well, the amount of funding. So it gets a huge amount of the American budget, and the UK space agency gets a bit of their budget as well.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of money that they get, I think people are often inclined just to look at that number as well and think about it like they're like, what, 500 million? That could go towards like the NHS, for
Curing
example.
cancer.
And like, I don't think people realize that like pumping money at something is like a way to like solve the problem. Like, you and I speak about the NHS all the time because your sister's a nurse, and we speak about how ridiculously inefficient the NHS is. You know, they do like a fantastic job. The doctors, the nurses, the surgeons, like all the administrators, people that work there, they do an amazing job, and we really appreciate them. But in terms of the fact that it's like a government-run like entity, it's absolutely mental how inefficient it is as an organization. How like caveman their like systems are. How up to date that the NHS actually is. It's like it's crazy. And you see this as well. We're like, I don't think if we just pumped another 500 million into the budget, like that wouldn't
solve these issues.
Wouldn't solve the problems. Like, no, I think
plaster.
I don't think the government even knows like where the money in the NHS like goes to now.
Yeah,
like it just like vanishes down the layers, and they have like no idea. But the system's like ticking by. It's not broken yet, you know.
Sorry, if you're going to
move
on to the point. Well, first thing to say, my sister's not actually a nurse; she's an ODP, and she actually fucking have me if I didn't correct you on that one.
Yeah,
But I think that NASA is the exact same as the NHS because like NASA is it's basically their publicly funded space company. You know, the
sure.
same way that we have a publicly funded health company.
I guess you're right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like so that's the thing. Like that's why I can't remember the numbers. It was ages ago when I read it, but I was like looking at the price that it cost NASA to put satellites in space compared to SpaceX, and like it was like 10 times as expensive for NASA to do one of these projects just because of like as you said, money is just like fucking disappearing. You know, these projects take 5 times as long. Like the administration's actually ridiculous. It's so unoptimized. You're using like systems from 10 years ago, fucking systems from 30 years ago type of thing, and it's exactly like you said. It's because NASA doesn't have competition. They don't need to try hard. Therefore, they're not going to optimize. They're just going to use the keep systems, the same systems they're already doing. So that actually probably does reinforce, particularly why some Americans might think that it's actually a money hole. It's because NASA might actually itself not be optimized for dealing with this money in a super efficient way.
Yeah, because we talk about this as well. We've had this conversation before, and I think actually the conversation about whether the NHS should be privatised or not was probably the catalyst for us actually starting Guide. I remember we sat on PlayStation that night and we spoke about
Yeah.
why people want the NHS to be privatised, and we spoke about how the NHS is so ridiculously inefficient. It's like a money black hole. But like for example, I work in the private sector, and I can see the corruption here as well. I can see all the reasons why this is also a bad system.
Mm-hmm.
Like we get things done for like as cheap as possible, but that comes with like its own problems. So if you privatize the NHS, sure, the price will go down and the service will go up
in the first human lives here.
In the first few years, but then after that sort of like innovation, after the systems get updated and it becomes a well-oiled machine, a private company then starts to look for ways in which you can make money, and if it can't generate any more money than it did last year, it will begin to cut corners. And with a body like the NHS, I don't think you can like morally justify like doing that, but America does seem to have this like private medical system that kind of does that, and it functions, I guess. I don't know, but I don't at the end of the day, I don't think that just pumping like £500 million into the NHS is like a super useful thing to happen. It might be like good for the government's like appearance to do that, but the way that they spend that money isn't necessarily going to be totally like beneficial or efficient in any way, like shape or form.
No, no, exactly. It's like one of the great examples that I think you and I talked about on that night was how like in the NHS right now there are like 40 different types of ambulance, and each one of these ambulances has to get kitted up a really specific different way. So like whenever one of them gets a flat tire, they can't just go to the ambulance fucking station, which like reducts it all. Each and every single hospital, each and every single system is completely unique and bespoke, and like fucking it's just so inefficient. And these are the type of things that if you were working for a company that was making money would never ever happen. But when it comes to dealing with human bodies, you don't want that. Like as I said, my sister, she's an ODP and she's worked with dead bodies. She worked with people like sitting there on the operating theatre, and she obviously works with people that do work in private, and it's like just a weird concept of like trying to save money when you're trying to save someone's life. Like don't use as many swabs, because like that costs us money. But it's like, but that's a fucking person sitting there. It's like it's like the ultimate moral question there. And when I think it's a great example of where you don't want corporations involved at whatsoever.
Yeah, the one that got me is when you spoke about how she has to like submit. Did you say she has to like submit annual leave on like paper? There's no computerized system for like annual leave. She can't like log in and like put it on. Just like write it down, hand it in at the desk.
And someone will put that on like a calendar. If the piece of A4 paper isn't lost within the 8 months of you asking for your time off, it's like it's archaic, man. Absolutely archaic.
Yeah, that would never happen at like a private organization.
Never.
I think those kind of things would immediately be stamped out, and that's how you would see the innovation. And we kind of spoke about it that night, how that it would going from like a government funded to a private organization. Maybe it should be on like a loop where like it should be a government contract for like 5 years, and then it should go to a private company, and they should like do their thing, because it's obvious that there are benefits to being government funded because you get the money that you need to like do the things. You can say this is how much it costs us to save lives. God damn it!
Yeah,
and the government will just give you that money. It'll fund you. but then there's like a massive lack of innovation. There's like a massive lack of efficiency in that system. Whereas if you go private, you get that innovation, you get that efficiency, and in the first little while anyway, it'll find it's really, really good at finding ways to optimize what's already there. But once it has optimized it and it can't do it any further, it will start to cut corners and it'll do things immorally. It will inevitably save less lives in order to save money. So they're like, you can see why both of these things would be discussed. You know, that like that might definitely enlightened me on why a body such as like NASA or the NHS maybe should be government funded, or why people argue that it should be privately funded, because these two systems clearly have their benefits, but they also have like massive downsides.
Yeah, and to bring it back to NASA, I think it's definitely one of those ones that, like, see, when it comes to I think you basically might have implied this earlier on, but you're like, see, for the first chunk of work, getting people to like another planet, starting a colony, getting like people into the ISS, International Space Station, that's all going to be NASA, you know, because that's not going to make money. See, as soon as though, once they're there, they're established, and they allow corporations in there, all of a sudden you're going to have places like SpaceX, you know, and they like start really, really optimizing this process. All of a sudden, like, you know, you can kind of imagine it already. This is purely hypothetical, but like, you know, the cost for someone to get to Mars would be like £100 million. See, as soon as you put that like publicly available, like just say we're going to create a market for public transit from one planet to another. See, after 5 years, that price will be like, you know, slashed, completely slashed. It's because these companies are just going to, they're looking at margins, they're thinking how much money can we make, and they're just going to, and assuming there is competition there, obviously if it wasn't a monopoly, then the prices would probably go up. But yeah, that's the type of situation I can end up foreseeing. And unfortunately, it's the main takeaway we have on most episodes we have of this guide. Is unfortunately, sure, like these things, these corporations do optimize it, and it would lead to a potential space travel system in which it was like hyper optimized and people were making lots of money. Things just inevitably get that corrupt way, you know, and all of a sudden it's just going to be a type of system I don't want any fucking part. I can't even imagine right now how shuttling people from one planet to another could be corrupted, but I've absolutely no doubt there is a way there, you know.
One of the things that makes me wonder about privatization of these bodies, every time you hear about it, like online, I don't know if you ever see like tweets or posts on Reddit about like the American health system and about how it's so like ridiculously expensive to like get an ambulance or to like stay overnight, even though it's private. How are these things like so expensive, even though they're private organizations over there? I'm not really sure how that one works, because it's not. I guess we pay into the national insurance or something like that. Was it we pay?
Yeah.
We pay into that, and that, I think that one funds the NHS. I think, but like we don't. It doesn't seem to be as expensive, I guess, to pay into that as it does to pay for healthcare over there. Which, I mean, I can't even remember the last time I went to the hospital though, or went to like my GP. Like I phoned up the other day to get like an inhaler prescription. Like how much would that have cost if I'd been like in America? I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, yeah, because in Scotland it's nothing. In England it's £19 to get my fucking inhalers, I have, you know. But I can imagine this will, we've said this a few times this episode so far, this could be an entire episode in itself, I'm pretty sure, how the American healthcare system works. But my main understanding is that they like fundamentally works differently. Like you have the corporations, the hospitals, and then you have the customers, but between them you have the insurance agencies, which act as a middleman. And like the hospitals will charge, you know, £10,000 for a shot of ibuprofen, and then it's the insurance agency that negotiates that price. So they will never pay 10,000 for that. They'll bring it down to whatever their rate is and then charge that rate to the customer. Sorry, I keep hitting this mic. If the customer didn't have insurance, then they'd be charged 10 grand. You know, and that's where the main takeaway is, that they effectively have a form of negotiation inherent within their entire healthcare system, which means that the people that don't have a middleman to represent them, and by the way, middlemans, all they do is fucking take value out of this system, you know, but this middleman, if they aren't able to represent them, they can potentially get shafted, you know, with like fucking 15 grand for an ambulance bill and all that crazy stuff.
Right, so bringing it back,
Fucking hell.
bringing it all the way back. What do we think are like the benefits of doing space travel then? Obviously we have all the things that I mentioned before. Is that enough to see return on investment? Because I mainly think about satellites. There are a lot of investments that are being made there, and those seem really good. There's like wholesale benefits to those that are applied to our lives and like every single day.
Yeah,
That
it's clear.
I don't think you even imagine the amount of benefit that you have from like satellite technology, you know,
Yeah, sure.
like
Yeah,
telecoms,
no idea.
you know, but things like the medical advancements, do you think the money is like justified there? Or, like the money that they put forward, is that justified to say for more technical advancements in like robots, for memory foam mattresses and things like that? Because I think if the government is still funding it, they're obviously saying yes, it is. And one of the things that I was reading about it as well is that as space travel becomes easier for us, as we're like going to Mars and things like that, there's going to be less people involved in these missions, and it's going to start to become like automated.
Right.
So there's going to be a massive like AI surge in these industries as well, as we're starting to go to space and like have an unmanned space mission. We're going to have to develop robots basically.
Yeah, I can see that.
And so there are going to be like advances in technology as we go forward that are going to benefit people on Earth. I guess I'm mainly asking the question, does it merit the funding it's getting, or should we be spending this money like somewhere else, like on social welfare, on something a bit closer to home?
I think it's a perfect example of looking at short term versus long term, isn't it? Like, I think in the short term, sure, like as you said, like fucking memory foam mattresses and dehydrated food and stuff like that is nice, and like I do generally believe there's lots and lots of value in satellites. That's almost undoubtable, but like humanity's, I don't think, going to get the value out of this till like down the line. But unless we put in the legwork now, we're never going to get there. So we have to do it in a way, you know, like, and the longer we take to do it right now, the longer until we reach a stage until we're getting more gains out of it. Like, for instance, imagine if we just used the moon to stockpile nuclear waste, you know, and that's just what we do. We fucking, the entire world gets set up with nuclear reactors. We get stuff, space travel between here and the moon gets like super hyper efficient, and that's
A
just
big
like
massive slingshot.
yeah,
And
oh
we
yeah,
just
yeah. I was thinking
shoot it
a
up.
catapult, but sure, we could use some sort of fancy rubbers material. But that's what I'm saying. Like, there's potential out there, and it's not going to happen overnight. And we need to do it. That's what we talk about on the guide all the time. It's like short term versus long term gains, and like this, I think space travel is a brilliant potential long term gain, as well as all just the humanitarian effort, go humanity type of shit, which I love as well.
Yeah, I can see that. I'd probably, in order to like really formulate like a solid yes or no answer to whether it's worth it or not, I'd probably have to look at the applications that we're like getting on a maybe not day-to-day basis, but when I'm talking about the advancements in technology, like the surgical robots, the medical mattresses, etc. I guess I'd have to look and see like how much of the investment that you put into like NASA does come back to those things, and that would more easily justify the money that you're spending, you know?
Yeah, but once again, it's one of those things. It's like you can't work in science and expect a profit. You know, that's not how science works fundamentally. Like, industry does that, but science takes ideas, works with them, and tries to come up with a conclusion. You know, like, it's literally ideas, does experiments, and comes up with an application of that type of thing at the end of the day. And like, it's just not something we can ever expect to be wholly profitable for mankind. You know, and I get where you're coming from in terms of, let's look at the gains and look at the pros and look at the cons, and like try and weigh it up and see whether it's worth its money itself. But like, in a way, it almost goes beyond that. I kind of think, I don't know, because you will never ever we'll never ever have any certainty of the value we're going to get out of it, because the inventions that we will invent, we haven't invented yet. So it's just kind of like
metaphorically in my head though, I'm seeing like a scientist. He's got his lab coat on. He's like looking through a big massive telescope, and he's looking into the stars,
twiddling his dials.
Yeah, he's just sitting there, and he's like, "Oh my god, look at this discovery we've made!" And like the world around him's like on fire. Like, you know, like the ozone layer's like totally gone. The environment's fucked. Like the place is basically a barren wasteland. And he's like, "But science," sort of thing. You know, that's the concern that I've got.
Yeah.
I get, although I think I don't think it's as easy as just taking the money away from like these programs and pumping it into environmental programs instead. You know, these are like wholesale changes that we need to like be making. And I think there are probably ways that the government and these organizations could be making these changes right now with the budgets that they have. They just don't, you know, like I think we say this all the time as well. We're like, they just don't make these changes because they won't see the short
No one's
term.
going to do that. Yeah.
They won't see any short term benefits, so they just kind of piss it away, sort of thing.
My main takeaway from this conversation is that you probably strongly disagree with CERN, then, right?
I'd have to look into it before I make any sort of serious opinion on it. But I can think there probably is value in the money that we spend on NASA. Like, it's probably justified. I can't imagine the government would be spending it if it wasn't justified. Although it would be good to see it. It'd be good to be able to look at the things around you and be like, oh, NASA did that sort of thing, which you could probably look up.
Yeah,
And
I
I don't
think
think
you'd be
it's not as
stunned.
simple. It's not as simple as some people that criticize it believe it is. I think the people that think you can just throw money at a problem. I don't think that. I think that's incredibly naive to
Mm.
think if you just transferred the budget over, the problems would go away, because they would not.
No, no. As every topic we talk about on the guide, we find out that there's we'll take a concept that we think is simple, realize that it's actually a little bit complex, and then realize that there's a huge degree of complexity we're not even aware of. And that is very much one of these examples, is that this is something that exists for a really particular reason, and it's probably not changed for a really particular reason, but it's very healthy to ask, why is that?